So welcome along, ladies and gentlemen, to the second Fancast with myself, Crofty, and F1 Experiences, the people that bring you closer to the action at the racetrack than anybody else. If you've ever thought about going to a race, F1 Experiences are the people you need to get in touch with before you take off and go and enjoy the wonders that Formula One has to offer. And we have got lots to talk about today with 8 more dedicated fans to Formula One. So let us welcome to the Fancast Kevin Johnson, Chris Jarvis, Grizel Rodriguez, Sasha from Germany. I can't even pronounce your surname, Sasha, but I'll try. Gorchakov, I think is how you pronounce that. Mary from the UK, Bill from the USA, Mark from Australia, Paul Hicklin from the UK, and myself, Crofty, will talk Formula One for the next 50 minutes or so. So without further ado, let's get into the chat. And Mary, let's start with you. What do you want to talk about today?
I want to talk about the battle for third in the constructors between Ferrari and McLaren.
Right. So, why not indeed? Because this could be the closest battle of the season, given Red Bull's dominance out in front at the moment. Who are you rooting for, McLaren or Ferrari?
I'm rooting for Ferrari.
Okay.
Because they didn't have the best weekend in France, sure, but they had a bit really stronger weekend in terms of pace in Austria. I kind of wonder, where could Leclerc have been had he not had to pit at the end of lap 1? Pace was really strong, and they both two really strong drivers as well, being pretty consistent. And over at McLaren, Lando has been amazingly consistent this year. Daniel, not so much. He's been there, but they're not there as well. So it could be really close.
It's interesting. I was having this conversation with someone else today, and I was saying that Daniel Ricciardo needs to start scoring more consistently and further up for McLaren at the moment. He's the big money signing, and it's not going quite well. But I love your dedication to the Ferrari cause there, where you say, wow, we wonder where Leclerc could have been had he not had to pit at the end of lap 1. Let's put this another way. Where could Leclerc have been had he not run into Pierre Gasly and caused some carnage as a result of that? I mean, we'll forgive him the mistake, but it was his own fault.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could have been fighting up with Lando for P5, definitely. Could he have gone a bit closer to the fight for P4? Maybe. He could have been.
Well, it's certainly possible. And in a season where development is not going to be as extravagant as we've seen before, it does come down to the drivers, as far as I'm concerned. Who else wants to chip in on this one? Who's got a point to make? Chris, I saw you tapping your hat. Are you a Ferrari fan too?
Absolutely. It's for me as a Ferrari fan, it's definitely a disappointing season, or at least the fall off has been very disappointing. But I'm excited to see the drivers. Sainz and Leclerc fighting back for it, and certainly McLaren is coming on strong. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that third team, Aston Martin, coming in and potentially making a challenge. It's still early in the season, we'll see, but certainly a lot to scrap for, a lot to fight for left in that midfield.
We'll talk Aston Martin in a couple of moments, Chris. Tell you what, let's go down under to Australia. Mark, whereabouts in Australia are you, sir?
I'm from Sydney, in Australia.
Excellent.
It's currently
right.
A bit late.
Beautiful. So you're not from Perth?
Part of the world.
It is
no,
a gorgeous part of the world. Do you root for Daniel Ricciardo? Is Australia feeling Daniel Ricciardo's pain at the moment?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was actually a fan of Lando. So I've been a McLaren fan for a couple of years now, and then I'm quite lucky that Daniel also came over. So I've got the Aussie and I've got Lando, the young gun.
So what do you think? What do you think is Daniel's problem at the moment? Why can't he get the results that Lando can?
It's great. I was actually just thinking about that, and it seems that Lando seems to sort of come through in qualifying and always does quite well there, and Ricciardo always seems to show a bit of promise when it comes to FP2, FP3, but he just always seems to lack a bit of pace in quali. So it could be that I hope it's just that he's just getting used to the car but it's hard to say really, and I don't think he knows either.
No, I think he's struggling to adapt to the unique braking demands, shall we say, that the McLaren has compared to the Renault of last year and the Red Bull that he was used to in the years before that. When he gets a handle on it, I think he'll be okay. But it is proving very, very difficult. And I just wonder, Bill, you've got a point on Lando.
Well, yeah. I mean, we all think about Daniel in years past, those great passes, those great races coming up from the rear. Lando just seems to be poised. He's consistent. He's focused on the overall picture. We love overtaking. We love Daniel's personality, especially his willingness to be just tongue-in-cheek on Netflix. But Lando just seems to have a poise, and a race is many, many laps, not one or two passes, not one or two corners. And Lando seems to have that poise and that focus on the overall picture.
He's developed well. Mary, to me, Lando Norris has grown into the man, whereas maybe he was the boy for the first couple of years. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's pretty fair. He has had as I said, he's had a really strong season so far. And even since like the end of last season, his last non-points finish was Portugal, I think, last year. And since then, is in like 13 races, he's had 9 top 5s, I think.
You trying to outstat me or something, Mary?
I looked it up the other day.
It is 13 races that Lando Norris now has the point scoring streak, and the only driver this season to score points in every single race. Right, show of hands. Who says McLaren beats Ferrari? Who's voting for McLaren to come out on top against Ferrari? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we've got there. Right, McLaren to beat Ferrari. That's motion carried then, as far as we're concerned on the Fancast here. Last point on this goes to Paul. Paul.
Yeah, I was wondering where Daniel might have finished without the loss of power. It is a concern that he's not settled in as quick as Perez, and Sainz is doing a fantastic job at Ferrari. But I think once Daniel settles in, he'll be up there. And that's why I think McLaren will beat Ferrari in the end.
I think he'd have finished in the points after the start he had. That is for sure. It was unfortunate for him that he did suffer that loss of power. There were 2 that had really bad technical issues, not just Daniel Ricciardo, but George Russell in the Styrian Grand Prix as well, who I felt desperately sorry for. He deserved better.
He did.
Deserved better. But such is life, and we'll hope that this weekend he can get a better result. Thank you, Mary, for your point. Like that. Let's go to Kevin. Kevin, what do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about, first I want to say it's brilliant that the F1 Experience and Liberty are taking on the fans' point of view. For me, my question was, do you think the bigger teams should do more to embrace the fans? Now, I was at Silverstone in Woodlands in the campsite, and Racing Point, as they were, put on the stage where I was able to go up there with my son and change a wheel on a car. And Otmar came on stage, Eddie Jordan came on stage, the drivers come on stage. You felt a bond, a closeness. I've got a soft spot for the old Racing Point as it was, because when Manor went bust, I took my son down to pick up a shirt. We went and got the shirt, but we did a tour of the factories. We got to Mercedes, it was a no-no. Racing Point, coming in, have a look at the car, come and hold Nico's Race of Champions trophy. You know, it was incredible to feel that we were able to get that close. And I think that the bigger teams should do more to embrace the fans. That you've been probably Crofty into the village to see what goes on. Or it is awesome, you know. And as a fan, to get that close to Otmar, who's pictured here with me and my son signing Nicky's. I've got a Nicky cap because I'm a big Nicky fan. And there, Lando signed it, Otmar signed it, Eddie signed it. Eddie looked down at me, clocked the cap, the Novomatic cap, and I'm coming down to you. And he comes, you know, he was brilliant. And I think the bigger teams should do more at races to embrace the fans, just like that small team, Racing Point, Aston Martin, now, did for the fans. It was electric and it was fantastic. And that's why... sorry, Crofty.
No, I was going to say it's a really good point, but and you make it well. obviously the bigger teams have an awful lot to fight for over the course of a race weekend. Not that the midfield teams and the back markers don't, of course. They'll argue that now that we have driver signing sessions, now that you've got pit lane access, now that you've got truck tours, now that you can go and see behind the scenes with F1 experiences in a way that you've never been able to before in the modern era of Formula One, and there are a lot for the fans. But it's interesting that you want to see more. So come on, let's ask the fans, because we have the fans in front of us. What more do you want? Sasha, we've not heard from you yet, sir.
Yes.
And we'll come to Griselle in a minute. What do you want to see the big teams do for the fans?
I think they are doing much stuff as well, but they are not as accessible because they have more to hide and more to lose. I'm sure they are answering questions for autographs and things like that quite as good as the other ones. Perhaps it's a good advantage for the smaller teams that they can make here a difference and generate their fans through a better accessibility.
No, that's a good point. I take that. When you're fighting for a championship, letting the fans come in behind the scenes is not always the sort of distraction that you want at a race weekend. Griselle, you're in Washington, D.C., so you're in the far reaches of the F1 fandom when it comes to going to races. How do you keep up with your favorite team? What does your favorite team do for you to enhance your fan experience?
So my favorite team, I support McLaren, and I think they're doing really well where they have, they are very present on social media, because that's how I get most of my access for F1 social media. And, you know, they started a TikTok page, they're starting to be active on YouTube and things like that. Like even on social media, just interacting with the fans. I think that's a very good way to interact as well. Going off of Sasha's point, I think that, you know, the bigger teams do have, you know, more to keep under wraps, whereas, you know, like, and they also do have more money. So compared to like the lesser teams, because it's a trickle down with the payout. But, you know, the smaller teams, I think they need more of that fan interaction to increase sales on merch and things like that, so that more fans can come in and, you know, supply possibly more money to the team as well.
Very good point. Paul and Bill. Bill first, you want to say something on this?
Well, it's interesting. IndyCar has absolutely mastered that. And some of it is just merely the personality of the drivers, the availability. Being in Indianapolis, we can see a lot of the, for lack of a better way to put it, hokey things that they're asked to do on race weekend, which requires incredible focus. And I think that the drivers and the teams and the personalities, they do that. I mean, if you watch the pre-race on Sky Sport, you see interviews and you see things going on behind the scenes. The Netflix series was a great example of that. You think about sitting in the meetings, the engineer meetings. So they're on the right track. I think it's just a matter of making sure that fans, not so much the core fans, but fans like myself, fairly new to F1, getting an opportunity to watch more of it over the past year or so, that they see those things and that they see just enough that you feel like you're part of the team.
It's a very good point. And I was doing a few interviews in the media pen on Thursday afternoon. Talk about some of the hokey things, as you put it, Bill, that drivers have to do. And Valtteri Bottas is answering questions about, you know, lack of form, you know, results that have gone against him, driver future, all that sort of thing. And then 2 minutes later, he's cooking pizza with Italian TV, you know, as a feature. He stood there. I mean, honestly, it was 30 degrees. It was so hot in Austria on Thursday, and he's cooking pizza, and he's got this massive chef hat on. Griselle, you'd have loved it as a pastry chef yourself. You'd have loved his technique, slapping the pepperami on. It was amazing. But it's the drivers have to do so much. You kind of also wonder with the top teams, how much more time have they got to give to the fans over a race weekend? Paul, your point on this one, please.
Yeah, it was just when you're sat at home watching the races and you see celebs that have been invited as guests of some of the larger teams because it's good for them to have certain celebs come along. But wouldn't it be great if they open up to normal fans like us to get that access that we're only going to
Bravo.
dream of.
You can with F1 Experiences, you can go behind the scenes. There's a huge amount that you can do. Now, obviously, the celebs get it for free. Influencers, people that can bring attention to the sport, teams and sponsors are very keen to bring them along. We saw Serena Williams, for instance, on the grid in Monaco and answering questions along with Max Verstappen after the race. I'm not quite sure Serena was quite as enamored with the race as Max Verstappen was, but she hadn't just won. I haven't got a problem with the celebs as long as the fans can get the access as well. And I know, look, our mantra at Sky is if you can't come to the race, we will bring the race to you and we will make sure that you feel like you are in the paddock and you are in the know. And we give you as much information and fun and atmosphere as we possibly can. Not easy in these COVID times, I know on that one. But maybe, here's an idea. Let's do another little straw poll here. Maybe F1 could pick 2 fans every single race to give them the behind the scenes access of all time, as long as they prove they are the most worthy fans for that. Who would? Yeah, I think we'd all be up for that, wouldn't we? Yeah. And yeah, once we're allowed, you can come into my commentary box as well, and you can come and see what we do with Sky.
Crofty.
Sasha, why are you sticking 2 fingers up at me, Sasha?
Two fans per team would be better.
You see,
Pushing it
this
down.
is why your proper F1 fans give you an inch, you take a mile. It's just like the real sport itself. I love it. Let's move on. Chris Jarvis, what do you want to talk about?
I'd like to talk about Aston Martin's return. I personally, as a fan, was very excited to see Aston Martin return after a 61-year absence. But as a fan, I've also often wondered why other manufacturers don't enter the Constructors' Championship. Manufacturers such as Porsche, Jaguar Land Rover, Volkswagen. Why do you feel that, what's preventing them from entering the race?
Money? I'd have thought.
It can't just be money, though, right?
Well, it's a simple answer, but I rather get the feeling it is. VW have had to pay out an awful lot recently that might have been a very good sponsorship budget for Formula One. But it's where the big manufacturers are positioning themselves within the market. Porsche have been very successful in World Endurance Championship at Le Mans, and now gone into Formula E. Do they want to spend a huge amount of money on an engine that would enable them to compete in Formula One? Honda have spent billions on that engine. Rightly or wrongly, they've had to. And look, they're now reaping the benefits just as they're about to leave the sport, which seems a bit of a shame to me. Porsche would have to spend that. VW would have to spend that. Any engine manufacturer, any car manufacturer, you feel would have to do that, unless they become a customer of a Mercedes, a Ferrari, a Renault, or a Honda engine, or Red Bull from next year. And that might not be what Porsche wants. What I think is that if you bring the cost down, then you can start to attract more teams. And I've argued before, we need more teams on the grid. Certainly 2 teams. But who has been energized by Aston Martin's return to Formula One? Mark, let's go to you. Do you like the fact that the Aston Martin name is back?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit of a new fan, so I guess it was a shame to see like Racing Point and Force India go out. But yeah, Aston Martin, so it's cool. It's very retro. It's got a lot of history there. It's really great to see them back, and with Seb Vettel this year, and his like excellent performance in Monaco, it's just really exciting to have this team in, and with Lance Stroll also coming through now. And really putting a string of good performances together. A bit of a shame in Azerbaijan, Baku, with the tyre puncture. But yeah, it's all coming together quite nicely, it seems.
Bill, what do you want to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, we saw Vettel get on the podium and name the people recognize.
Hang on 2 seconds, Bill. I'm hearing you, then I'm hearing you 2 seconds later. And I wonder if you've got, someone's got a speaker on somewhere. Sorry, was that you? Sasha, was that Bill? Try again. Talk to me.
Yes, I would like to.
Right. Sasha, hang on 2 seconds. We've got to build them. We'll go to you. I just you messaged me to say me, and I thought, oh, is that you that's coming back at you? Bill, carry on.
How do we sound? Better now?
Better now.
Okay, very good. Well, with Aston Martin, it's a name people recognize. And I mean, you had Vettel get on the podium. So I think it's good to have them back. And I think it's a fair point to want to have more manufacturers in here. And I think Crofty, without dovetailing us into another topic, it plays off something you said on the first Fancast, which is, do we expand the grid? Do we get more teams in? Do we change the format and the layout of the grid based on the race and the track capacity? I mean, Indianapolis, you get 11 rows of 3 for 33, but there are 2 drivers, Fernando Alonso was one of them a few years ago, who don't qualify for the race. Saturday is exciting now. Can you imagine if we bring in more spots and then we bring in more teams, more manufacturers? And Saturday, not only are we going for pole, but we're also trying to not be left out of the race, or we expand the race to make it even more exciting.
This is something we used to have in Formula One. Sasha, and then I'll come to Mary and also to Griselle, because we haven't spoken to you for a while. So, Sasha, what do you want to say?
Concerning Aston Martin, it's always better to have more renowned names in a sport. Sure, very important. It would be even better if we would have 1 or 2 new teams, so that we have small underdogs like Jordan was, and then Racing Point, Force India in between, and the manufacturers. I think the mixture, the big ones versus the small ones, was always a nice story.
I couldn't agree more. Mary, what do you think?
Well, yeah, seeing like more teams coming like into this, like a few more teams coming in would be like good. Give more drivers a chance at coming into Formula One, who are like in the sport. Like thinking Callum Ilott, as an example, he missed out this year on a seat.
Bring in more teams. Yep. Griselle, do you feel that 10 teams is enough, or would you like to see more variety as well?
I think I would definitely love to see more variety, especially because, there's always this talk about bringing in more people that can't really afford to be in the sport. So I think it could also open up that opportunity for people who can't or don't have access to the sport. So I would love to see more teams.
Yeah, because it's not just about more drivers. You need engineers, you need mechanics, you need strategists, you need marketeers, you need team principals. You're opening it up to a wealth of job creation at a time in Formula One where maybe there will be a few redundancies over the years because of the cost cap that is currently taking place. Personally, when I first came into the sport, I think we had 24 drivers for a few years, and I want to see 24 drivers on the grid, competitive drivers. I don't want to see the HRTs of this world, because I think we want our sport to be a lot closer, and I don't want to go back to the days where people don't qualify for the race as well, because I think that's slightly unfair. But I do want to see everyone competitive on the grid, and not have the days of my old mate Karun Chandok getting lapped after 4 laps. That was never fair from him on this. Mark, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So like with the new teams and adding, I guess, more spots on the grid, and I guess that will be helped with the new regulations coming in, reducing the cost cap. But I just had some stuff with, I guess it just goes into what I wanted to speak about like driver pathways into F1 for like the young drivers coming through the ranks now. So like the Mercedes program, they had Nick de Vries, who won in Formula 2 and now he's in Formula E. And we have Esteban Ocon as well, who's now questions about his future with Mercedes, how they signed long term with Alpine. And then Red Bull, you have their young driver sort of circus going on there with Alex now in DTM and Pierre now back at AlphaTauri. And then at Renault, you got Guang Yu Zhou and Oscar Piastri, an Aussie coming through now, the F3 winner last year, and Lundgaard all in F2. So it just makes you wonder how much talent is being held up in F2 and being shipped off to these other other leagues, like Formula E and DCM, and like if we need those spots just to get some exciting young talent through.
Right, this is Mark's point. Let's discuss it. How do we get more young talent coming into Formula One? If we're not going to create new teams, how do we make sure that there isn't a blockage? A Yarno trolley train, shall we say, but this time off the track rather than on it. Who wants to talk about this? Bill?
I think one of the things would be the exposure to it. In other words, more media coverage. ESPN's done a great job carrying the Sky Sport coverage here in the US of all the practice sessions and then the qualifying and everything. I think if there was more opportunity for fans to go out and see Formula 2, Formula 3, maybe also hear about some of the younger drivers. I mean, Crofty, you and the gang do a great job to mention during your broadcast, and you also harken back to the heritage of some of the drivers, where they came from. So if we had more opportunity, especially in bigger markets like the US, where Formula One still has so much room to grow, I think if we were to see, and again, it gets back to, we saw it with Netflix and we see it with, the day of on the grid, looking at the cars and things like that. So I think if there was just an opportunity to see more of the races, to see more of these young drivers as they are coming up, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree on that one. It's why I'm really glad that Sky Sports F1 shows the support series at a Formula One race weekend.
Yeah,
Chris, who said, yeah, brilliant? Was that you, Chris?
No, it was Kevin.
I was Kevin. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, it's okay.
Kevin, tell me, how do we solve a problem like too much young talent gets lost to Formula One too quickly?
Paid drivers. I don't always agree with it. I think I'll just put that question up. Do you think that the paid drivers get in the way of better talent?
Well, do you?
I do. There's some great drivers in the Formula 2 series. Very good drivers. And, there's, without naming names, there's one guy at the back of the grid. I don't think he deserves to be there.
Well, go on, name names.
Masserspin, sorry.
Okay. Why does he not deserve to be in Formula One?
Don't you, honestly, I'm asking around the table here, do anyone watch the F2 and see better drivers? Because I certainly do.
Right.
There's a few nods going on there.
There are a few nods going on there. Let's expand this. Because personally, I think if you've won races in F2, and you've won races in F3, and you have shown the ability that he has shown in the feeder series to Formula One, you deserve a crack at Formula One. However you get into it, you deserve a crack at it. But I do concede that Nikita Mazepin, being the son of a billionaire, has more opportunity to get into Formula One than Callum Ilott, who last time I looked, isn't the son of a billionaire, despite the fact, he's on the Ferrari program. It doesn't necessarily give him that opportunity. You can argue that paid drivers who pay their way into Formula One don't deserve it. But then you're also arguing that people like Lance Stroll shouldn't be in Formula One. And I personally think Lance should, because I think he's a very good young driver.
I agree.
Getting better all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and I always go back to the fact that Niki Lauda brought a budget with him when he first started in Formula One. And last time I looked, he very much deserved to be in the sport. But it's a difficult one. Paul, where are you, Paul? I think you've got an idea that everyone is going to agree with here.
3-car teams. If you've got someone like Callum Ilott, then put him in the third car and have all teams run a rookie in the third car.
I think that's a super idea. Does anyone disagree with that at all? Because I think Paul might have just cracked it on sporting grounds here.
Well done, Paul.
However, that's going to be expensive. So you're going to have to give teams more money to run 3-car teams. You're going to need more staff. You're going to need more components, more engines. Back at the factory, you're going to need more people as well. You're not going to be able to do that under the current budget cap. Sasha,
Yeah, I think resources was not the big problem of Formula One since this budget cap, and perhaps it can be adjusted to allow for a third car. Also, with a third car, we would have more advertising space. Perhaps the rookies could display their own sponsors, and it would be good for the whole sport.
Look, I don't disagree with it. I think it's something that's worth looking at. Maybe you have, for the rookies, the chance to do a race on the Saturday, if they're not competing in F2, for instance, whereby we could have a rookie race. Maybe you have teams are forced to run a rookie for 4 times during the course of a year, and 2 and 2, the normal race drivers have to sit out certain races. Trouble with that, of course, is that the fans then don't get to see all their heroes that they want to see each and every week. So I'm sure you guys would want to see a race that Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton weren't taking part in, or in the case of Griselle, Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo there. I just so you know, I've remembered that you're a big McLaren fan, or in the case of Mary, Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz, although I'm sure Pierre Gasly would like Charles Leclerc not to be in a race or anywhere near him in the next couple of weeks. Look, I think it's a really good idea. Three car teams would get my vote, but there needs to be a financial structure put in place so that the teams can actually afford that one. But brilliant. Mark, thank you very much for raising that point. We are 4 points down. We have 4 more discussion topics to chat about on this latest Crofty Fancast with F1 Experiences. But we have come to half-time, and I think it's time for a word from our sponsors here.
F1 Experiences gets you closer to Formula One than ever before. Ensure you get the most out of your Grand Prix weekend with an official ticket package from F1 Experiences, which include VIP trackside hospitality, behind-the-scenes access, and the chance to meet some of the sport's biggest names. Secure your access today by visiting f1experiences.com.
Welcome back to the Crofty Fancast with F1 Experiences. We are chatting F1 as we do throughout the season here. If you want to take part in the Crofty Fancast, you can, just like our 8 F1 fans have done today. Just go to the F1 Experiences website. That's f1experiences.com, and you'll find all the details on there. Put your name down and register, and you can take part in the next Fancast. What do you want to talk about, sir?
Track limits. Because
so you do want to talk about penalties. I knew this was going to happen.
I love it.
And if you want to talk about football, I am just for the better team. That's not an interesting point I can make.
Yeah, you see, everyone knows that when a German football fan says, I just want to talk about the better team, he does mean Germany on this occasion. It's never going to be England. But good luck in the match session. Right, track limits. What do you want to say about track limits?
They pose more and more problems to the races, and there are more and more discussions coming up and lap times to be deleted, and I think things are getting complicated, and fans would enjoy simple sports a bit more. When they can exactly see who makes a fault when and what the consequence is, I think that's the easiest way, and it worked quite for a long time.
Put your hands up, anybody, if you understood the track limits in Austria at the Styrian Grand Prix last weekend. Put your hand up if you understood the track limits.
I stopped to try to understand.
You tried. Right. So nobody has put their hand up there at all.
No.
Because sometimes there are differences, because after the start, the first turn very often has another rule than the other turns in the race afterwards. So that's the complication again. And yeah,
Okay, so Sasha, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to apologise to everybody because obviously I didn't explain it well enough, and I tried to. So this is something I've done wrong here. Although I'm as confused as some on track limits. It was the red and white curb in Austria, not the white line as stated in these in the sporting regulations that define the track limits. But you're quite right. At turn 1, drivers were going wide quite a lot and not being punished. Because the theory is that there's no lasting advantage. There's no advantage to be gained out there. But Mary, as we saw, big advantage to be gained for Charles Leclerc and for Lando Norris, I think, at the start as well. I think he also went off the track. And I don't know why drivers weren't being punished if they were going off the track at turn 1. I'd like during the race, every time a driver goes off the track, unless they've made a big mistake, I'd like it to be noted and bring in the black and white flag rule. And, after 3 violations, then you start to get the penalty because these are the best drivers in the world. They can actually stay within the track limits. Who liked what they did at turn 6 in Austria? Did you notice what they did in turn 6 in Austria after last year's race and before the Styrian Grand Prix? No, see what they did, they got rid of those horrible, nasty, aggressive curbs and they brought the gravel closer to the track. See, because gravel is a natural penalty and it slows you down on that one. And come on, give me your thoughts on this. Sasha's introduced a great topic here. What would you do with regards to track limits? I think, Kevin, you want to say something?
Yeah, Martin Brundle always says, stay on the track. Easier said than done, obviously. They're going to try speed. But as he says, if there's a wall there, you wouldn't go near it.
Very good point.
Stay within the limits.
Absolutely. Mark, what would you say?
Yeah, but I just have to agree with everything that's been said so far. Like, bring back the black and white flag, time penalties for 3 violations, keep track of them. And I think in like the esports and all that, they keep, like, it's very stringent. Like, if you go off, then your time gets deleted. It's all very strict. And I think, I guess in racing, if they make a small error, then it gets noted. And then in qualifying, if they make an error, they go off the track, then the time should be deleted. And they are the best drivers and they train for these like sort of high stress, high pressure environments. And they should have excellent focus. And they've drilled down all of this in like the sims. They have the muscle memory there. I think it should just be a little bit more strict.
Sasha's just messaged me to say turn 6 curb still too broad in Austria. Broad as a car doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for Formula One. But here's the other problem when it comes to track limits. The tracks that we race on aren't just Formula One tracks. They're used by a whole variety of different cars and, more importantly, bikes. And the bikes don't like the gravel, and they certainly don't like excessive curbs. So you'd have to properly give us what we need in F1, you'd have to change the tracks to suit F1. But that's a very expensive thing to do when you're relying on track days, for instance, that certainly don't like gravel as well, because people don't want to bring their car along to a track day and then lose it in the gravel. They want the runoff areas. We want to see a bit more gravel. But I don't understand. Mary, maybe you can throw some common sense into this one. I don't understand why every corner can't be policed. And if people are abusing the track at a certain corner, no matter where that corner is, then they get pulled up for it. I don't understand this.
Yeah, we've seen it like all year with cars, with drivers like going like off the track. Bahrain was like turn 4 at Bahrain. They were going off a lot during the race there. Turn 1 in Austria, as has been said, they tend to always run wide there. Like, why can't it just like, why can't the track limits just be like consistent for every corner, as has been said multiple times in broadcasts, like the white line? Yeah,
I feel like I'm on repeat a lot with that one, to be honest. And I do. It probably all comes down to money once again, and to police every single corner means you need to bring in more people to do it and more cameras to do it as well, and it just becomes a little bit too expensive. Bill, your final points on track limits, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I think the gravel is a good idea. Fair point that you have to keep in mind all of the other tracks that were there. You can look for alternate things. Remember, I think it was last year, Italy, where Vettel went through the styrofoam, and it becomes a mental aspect to it. You won't damage the car, you won't do anything, but the instinct will be to slow down, and that's very, very visible. So there are creative ways that they could come up with to enforce it or make it more apparent. Again, though, we go back to the fan experience. I'll say that Crofty, you and the gang at Sky Sport do a great job to constantly let us into those conversations. And when you hear the teams talking to the marshals, that's really, really good. That's just something that really adds to it. We understand the conversation. At least we know there's a conversation about it.
Yeah, I love it. It's a very new innovation from the world feed that we now get to hear the teams talking to the race director. Michael Massey is a very good man doing a very difficult job, and you hear the teams talking to him now. You can kind of appreciate what he's getting every single second during the course of a race weekend. But what I also like about Michael Massey is I can go to him in the paddock and say, "Are you going to take those curbs out like they want to in Paul Ricard?" And he turns around and says, "Crofty, not a chance. It ain't going to happen." And so he's open with us so that we can bring that to you guys as well. Right, let's move on from track limits. We got about 15 more minutes and we got 3 more points to talk about. So let's start with Griselle, or continue with Griselle. What do you want to talk about, my lovely?
So I was kind of going off of Mary's point as well with Ferrari and McLaren. So knowing that they're the forerunners of the best of the rest, do you think that they have the consistency to possibly bridge the gap to Mercedes and Red Bull this year? Because there was a lot of talk in preseason that, you know, their cars are looking better this year. And with the lineup that they have, there is a big possibility that they can do that this year. So I just want to kind of get everyone's opinion on that and talk about that.
Well, first and foremost, what do you think?
So I think it's possible, but seeing as I think Ferrari has been less consistent with in the races this year. And so until they find consistency and are staying within, I guess, a certain limit on the grid when they're racing, like let's say if they were to stay like P6, P7, or something like even higher than that, I think having that consistency will help, you know, move them closer to that. And I think with McLaren, you know, that conversation started because we see a lot of consistency in Lando Norris, and you know, Daniel. I think everyone agrees that Daniel Ricciardo is one of the fastest men on the grid. So you know, having him in that lineup, they were expecting him to bring more points to the team. So I think, you know, like that was, I think, a big point in that whole conversation. But I don't want to knock any other teams because, you know, like AlphaTauri and I think Aston Martin are definitely bringing themselves up within the grid with seeing Vettel's pole. And I think they last race were both in the points. So I think they're definitely coming up with a better technique, having better strategy and having a better car. So I don't think it's solely just them, but I think, you know, like they're like the forerunners for that. So I think all the teams are starting to understand what it is to have a good hybrid car, but they're definitely the forerunners in that. And they might be able to do it this season, but as of right now, I do not see that happening.
And that is probably the biggest point here. Do you see it happening? No. And we'll ask if that matters or not in a minute. Bill, what did you want to say, sir?
Well, I think, and Griselle hit on it, AlphaTauri is on that outside too, and I'm a huge Pierre Gasly fan, so it was a disappointing weekend this past weekend. Crofty, how about you? Because you've got the opinion here and head nods left, right, and center with all of us. When do we see this becoming more than a 3 or 4 driver, 2 or 3 team sport? Is it next year? Is it the year after that?
Now, my worry is that next year, to be honest, we could go back to one team dominating because it often happens. Well, it often happens when we have a massive rule change in Formula one team gets it right and other teams don't get it right. And what we've got at the moment is a grid that is quite concertinaed. But we'll talk about that in a moment because, Paul, I think that was something you wanted to talk about today. Do I think that Ferrari and McLaren can bridge the gap to Mercedes and Red Bull this season? No. I think if you look at that Austria race, they were still a long way behind Mercedes and Red Bull. And in a year before a major regulation change, every team has said that they're not concentrating as much on this season as they are for the future. And the developments aren't going to come as thick and fast as we've seen in the past. I think we're going to see a really tight midfield battle. So the question I want to ask you guys is not, are Ferrari, McLaren going to bridge that gap? But does it matter to you as fans that they don't bridge that gap? Or do we watch our Formula One? Can we enjoy our Formula One knowing there are different battles going on throughout the grid? So you've got your top two, you've got your middle six, and then you've got your bottom two all very close together. Sasha, what do you want to say?
On the short run, it's not a big problem. We always had dominance of Williams, of Lotus, whoever. But when it's going more than 3 seasons, and it's always the 1 or 2 teams who might sometimes who are on the top of the rostrum, it's getting too disappointing also for the rest of the grid, and they struggle to develop their fan base. So, and I think with some changes in the technical regulations from time to time.
Is that a thunderstorm?
Big thunderstorm, sorry. With more changes.
That's just the gods preparing you for disappointment later on.
Maybe they already made their choice, yes. So it's the sign that England will win because here it's raining.
Oh dear. Sasha, good points that you make. Mark, do you want to come in this one? Or Paul, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I think it's okay in the short term, but as Sasha said, 3 years, 4 years of the same 2 teams dominating. How much money do teams like McLaren throw at it to come third, to come fourth? And at what point do the sponsors that they have get bored of sponsoring a team that's only going to finish third or fourth? We remember the days of Jordan, underdogs, but they could win races. And while it wasn't always consistent, they had a chance. And if you don't have the teams at least having a chance to win, you almost get to the point of what's the point of them being there?
Let's bring Paul in again, because I think, Paul, I'd like to go on to your next point, because I think it actually impacts on what we're talking about at the moment. So what was the topic you wanted to talk about today?
Yeah, it was with the rule changes next year, as you've hit on. Are the big teams going to pull further ahead? As you've said, there's a concertina at the moment where all the teams are closing the gap. And as we always have when a rule change comes in, there's always 1 or 2 teams that come out further ahead. And on the back of that, will the cars be able to follow each other much more closely next year? Will we get the chance to see some more overtaking with the rule changes?
Formula One say, and they crunch the numbers at Liberty, that the following car will have 86% of its downforce available with the regulation changes next year, compared to 55%, which is currently what a car has available. So when we talk about the difficulty of one car following another, it's because they've lost 45% of their downforce following closely the car in front. It also requires the tyres to be able to follow the car in front a little better as well. But that should happen with the reduction in downforce. And it is a massive change for next year. And the drivers have got very different cars to try and drive. I'm not sure you're going to get an overnight fix, but I do think eventually we might have a bit of a fairer competition. And it's not just the regulation changes and how the cars are going to change. It's also that there is less money available all around. You can't just do what Ferrari used to do and test every single day of the week at 4 or 5 different tracks. And also you have the wind tunnel and the CFD restrictions as well, which I think are already starting to hurt Mercedes, whereby if you're the champions, you get less time in the wind tunnel to develop your car. And if you're Haas or Williams finishing bottom, you get more time to develop your car. So that, I think, is a super rule. The cost cap, I think it's about time. The regulation changes, you can argue we don't need them at the moment because the racing's really good, but they should be a lot better in the future. Who's excited about next year? Put your hand up if you're excited about next year with the regulation changes. Chris, why are you so excited about next year?
Well, again, hopefully it brings some change, right? It's going to disrupt a lot of teams, and a lot of teams are going to have to adapt. And when you have those big regulation changes, it mixes up things quite a bit. And so, certainly my hope is to see that midfield grow stronger, and hopefully they got a chance at doing it.
Bill, what do you say?
Anytime there's a new change, those first few races will be exciting. I'm like everybody. I mean, your earlier question, Crofty. We'll all watch. I do think that there could be the possibility of it becoming more competitive. So whenever we have that change, it's hopeful. It's something new. They are trying to address it. So we'll see.
Bill has also written down here on our chat, more DRS zones. And just as Bill wrote more DRS zones, Sasha wrote no DRS, please. So Bill and Sasha, you can have your own little battle on this one. Go on. You've got 20 seconds. Bill has got 20 seconds to argue for DRS. Sasha, you've got 20 seconds to respond. Go, Bill.
Overtaking is exciting. Even when there's a battle at the front, the pictures show you the overtake. Even if it's a marginal change, there is that possibility. Overtaking is exciting.
Sasha.
I think overtaking is only exciting when it's not supported by a technological gimmick that enables you to have many straight line overtaking. I want to have it more diverse.
Right. That's a good comeback. Some DRS overtakes are not exciting. But for me, when they get DRS right, and it allows the driver behind to pull alongside into the braking zone, 100%. It is still really exciting. And that's what DRS should be doing. Sometimes it's a bit too powerful. Sometimes it's not powerful enough. But it is it's a sticky plaster on a broken leg, isn't it? You're trying to come up with something to give us more overtaking when it's been a bit tricky in recent years. I don't dislike DRS at all. But maybe with the new regulations, we won't need it in the future. Let us see on that one. A couple more bits on next season. Let's go to Griselle and to Mary. What are you most excited about next year, Griselle?
But I feel like it's like an open-ended question because with the regulations, it's going to throw everything into the air. And, maybe possibly another team will pull out in front. So like seeing where the grid will fall next year is going to be so interesting. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most. Yeah.
Because if one team dominates, another team will get it so much better than they've had it before. Mm-hmm. Agree with you on that one. Mary, in the Shetland Islands, what is going to be keeping you excited on those long winter nights that start in August and end in May?
Well, May is usually closer to summer. But no, it's just the unknown of it's difficult to call who's going to be on top next year at all. Like for all we know, it could be Williams and Haas fighting for the title next year.
Brilliant.
So we really just don't know what's going to happen.
And then Kevin will be really excited when Nikita Mazepin stands next to Nicholas Latifi on the podium and lifts up the trophy that, according to Kevin, they bought their way into and shouldn't have their hands on. Isn't that right, Kev?
Yeah. Right. My excitement is George alongside Lewis.
Yeah. Now, let's do a quick straw poll here. Yeah. Lewis probably going to stay, 3-year deal, stay with Mercedes. That's what I reckon will happen. Who votes George Russell as his teammate for next year? Quick show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. With a bit of an iffy somewhere in there. Who votes Valtteri Bottas for his teammate next year? Mark.
No.
Just Mark. Just Mark then. Hey, Mark, to be honest, I don't think it's a right or a wrong answer. Whatever Mercedes do, there will be a wrong answer. And whatever they do, there'll be a right answer to the question of who you fit into that seat. Right. Grizel, we've heard your topic and we haven't heard Bill. So, Bill, fire away.
We've hit on a lot of them. My thing was originally cliched and simple. How do we grow the sport? How do we make it more competitive? I kind of stole some thoughts after watching the first Fancast. So I guess that I can kind of default to a new one is dovetailing off what we've talked about here. Who are those middle of the pack teams? Who are the next teams to be coming up here? Let's look at it from that other side. If it continues to stay outside of the core fans, if it continues to say 2 or 3 drivers, 1 or 2 teams, does F1 risk losing fans or losing an opportunity to grow its sport?
What a great question to finish off there. Does F1 risk, if there's not more variety on a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday for qualifying, do we risk an opportunity to grow the sport? Hands up, who wants to answer this one? Straight, slap bang in the middle of my screen is Chris on the Kemmel Straight. Chris.
Absolutely. And that's one of the questions, that's one of the topics I try to address. What is it going to take to get more parity in F1? I think that's been a consistent concern of the fans. It was certainly raised in your first podcast. What does it take? Does it take a money cap? Does it take more teams on the grid? What is it going to take?
I think it's going to take a bit of everything and a bit of patience as well. Because I don't think F1's broken, but I do think we can make a few little tweaks here and there to give it an absolute sound footing for many years to come. Kevin, what did you want to say on this one?
It's developments that interest me a lot because they don't just plan for the next season. They're planning seasons down the line here. So there's a long way to go for teams to develop. I've been impressed with Alpine's pace of a Saturday. They seem to be and going back 5 years ago, my son went to Enstone, the Renault factory, and they said then there's a 5-year plan, and this is what they're heading for. And I can see that coming up. And if other teams are doing the same, they're going to close the gap with the changes next year.
Let's hope so. Paul, what did you want to say on this?
Yeah, I think we've got to hope that the changes next year do close things up and mix things up at the top, because I do worry that long-standing fans are just going to get bored with the same teams winning, and we just need to mix it up. It's always been a case that 1 or 2 teams are ahead, but over the course of 7 or 8 years, those teams have changed, and we've had the same couple of teams there for the last 7 or 8 years since the hybrid engines. And I do worry at risk that long-term fans are going to switch off and look elsewhere.
I do find it very amusing, and I love the fact that people tweet me all the time, and I do read all the tweets. Don't always respond to them, so I don't get the chance. But I get a few people will say, "Oh, that's it. F1's too boring. I'm never watching again. It's all Mercedes domination, or it's all Max Verstappen domination. I'm never going to watch this again." And then about 4 weeks later, I'm still not going to watch this again. So you obviously haven't turned it off yet, which is good. Although what I would say is that the viewing figures in the UK, certainly I can't vouch for Germany. I'm not quite sure the details, Sasha. But in the UK and the US, the viewing figures are well and truly going up and rising this year because we've got a competition, we've got a battle out in front. So, come on, Mercedes, keep that battle going, and then more and more people can discover what a marvellous, wonderful way to spend a Sunday Formula One actually is. Mark, what did you want to say on this?
Yeah, seems that having a closer pack will be good. Not too much really to add. I mean,
you can add whatever you wish, or as little or as much as you wish. It's your fan
when it's just like it gets boring when it's just like the 1 or 2 drivers sometimes. It's always like, say, if you look at the soccer in France, Switzerland, it's always nice to have that sort of underdog. And I think that's why last year Monza, Pierre Gasly on the podium, this year Monaco, you had Lando and Carlos, and then Vettel at Baku. And it's always good to have these sort of surprise stories, and it's good to let it be a bit of element of like probability in there. It's not always just the same consistency. Like I guess this weekend was, last weekend was.
Crofty, isn't this why we need George alongside Lewis next year? Mix things up. Come on.
Lewis wants that, though.
I definitely think it would mix things up just a bit on that one. Mary, do your friends like Formula One? Do you find that there's a communal interest, or are you watching F1 alone, hoping that one day someone will share your passion as well?
Well, I'm really just mostly watching it on my own, to be honest.
If you weren't so far away in the Shetland Islands, we'd all come around your house and watch it with you, to be honest.
I mean, I sometimes watch it with my brother when we're in the same place, but yeah, he lives elsewhere, so can't always watch it with him.
What would make more people of your age group watch Formula One, do you think?
I have absolutely no idea.
I just thought I'd throw that one in. We try sprint qualifying at Silverstone. Do you think that is going to have an interest to a younger generation?
I mean, it could, but it's one of them things that I don't think we'll really know how well it'll do and if it would attract more like the younger generation until it happens and we see that first one in a couple of weeks' time.
I can't wait for it. I must admit. Grizel, do you watch alone, or do you have someone to share your F1 passion with?
Oh, I watch alone. I just talk to everyone about it, and they're like, "I don't understand the thing you're saying to me," but I watch all by myself. Especially being a US fan, there's still a lot of growing to do with the US fan base. Especially, I think in my area, like I haven't found any other F1 fans around, so I watch by myself.
Oh, well, let's hope that the Fancast here has helped you realize there are lots of other F1 fans out there and you never have to be alone again. Sasha has just messaged me to say, Crofty, can you organise a Silverstone ticket for Mary? As much as I'd like to, I'm not the man with all the tickets. F1 Experiences are the people with all the tickets, and they have got packages left for Silverstone, I can tell you that, and not many, because Silverstone's going to be a full house. How incredible is that going to be? 140,000 fans over the weekend at Silverstone. You could be there with F1 Experiences as well, and you could be anywhere with F1 Experiences. If you're looking at 2022, France and Canada packages are now on sale. Has anyone here ever been to the Canadian Grand Prix? Yeah?
No.
Yeah? Shaking your heads. One of the great races to go to during the course of a Formula One season. I've missed it an awful lot. Who's had to drop off? Chris has had to drop off, sadly. Chris, you have been absolutely lovely. Kevin, Mary, Paul, Sasha, Grizel, Bill, Mark, you have been really lovely as well. Thank you very much for taking part in these Fancast or in this Fancast. Anyone can take part in the Fancast. F1experiences.com is the place to go. Quick hands up. We're going to do one more straw poll. We're going to do two, actually. First and foremost, is Max Verstappen going to be world champion at the end of the season? Hands up, please, if you think he is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's a full house, ladies and gentlemen, for Max Verstappen. And the more important question, in about 3 hours' time, who's going to be smiling more, me or Sasha? Who votes for Sasha?
Crofty.
I've got absolutely no faith whatsoever in the... I've got no faith.
I think they're going to do it, Crofty.
They tell me it's coming home, but they don't tell me what. I've got more faith in Nikita Mazepin getting through the next Grand Prix without spinning or hitting his teammate than I have in England's footballers in the course of their match against Germany. And thank you, everybody, for taking part. And thank you to you for watching as well. This has been the latest in our series of F1 Fancast with me, Crofty, and F1 Experiences. Take care of yourself. Have a great season. And we'll be back in a few weeks' time with episode 3.